Car sharing and mobility on demand systems present a disruptive business model to existing business models. The OEMs, the original manufacturers of vehicles, the auto manufacturers themselves, feel that in many cases that this will cannibalize their traditional sales of vehicles. And I have two responses to that. The first one is that, well, if you don't do it, someone else will. And there are a lot of companies looking at car sharing and making a lot of profit in this area, particularly car rentals. Car rentals are moving into car share, and a number of car companies are actually exploring car sharing as well. Some of which are sort of just PR, others are intensively looking at these business models. The second reason why OEMs should really look at this too is that the commodity product business model that they have is challenging. If you don't have to look any further than GM going bankrupt a few years ago to realize that this model of just selling cars and competing down to the penny versus other vehicles is not a profitable model. So shifting from a commodity product business to a service business or a mobility service business is something they should really look at. And that's a challenge for a lot of car companies because they're really product companies. They're interested in making hardware. They're making the vehicle itself. Doing service is a completely different kind of business. So I think that they really have to engage in that, and that's really the challenge. There's a few examples of companies that have done that in the past. IBM, for example, was a hardware company. It's really now more of a service company. And you can look at the companies that didn't do that. Digital, for example, and they don't exist anymore. So I think that one of the big challenges is to embrace these new types of models. I think that there are multiple levels and multiple types of companies that could work into this space. Obviously, the auto industry itself has the advantage of being very large. They have the expertise in making automobiles, and they have sort of huge investments so that they can move and manufacture and test, crash test, for example, vehicles. And I think that's really one stream, definitely. There are a whole bunch of smaller automotive makers that are startup companies, very nimble, that are able to actually get the product out there quickly and to innovate much more quickly. So those companies are actually worth looking at as well. And there are the Teslas in the world, but a whole bunch of other startup companies that are creating value, particularly in India. The company Riva, for example, and Mahindra, and Tata, they're all moving into this space very quickly. There are a lot of Chinese companies as well. The other side of the equation is companies that are not traditionally automotive that are now moving into the automotive space. Battery companies, for example. BYD in China is a company that is looking at converting their battery business into a mobility business. So a number of these new startup companies, particularly in the battery realm and energy storage, that could actually move into this space. There are a number of other established, well-established Japanese companies that make batteries. Sony, for example, makes batteries. They could certainly move up the supply chain into an OEM level. Of course, there's some conflicts potentially because they make parts for other manufacturers. So I think in the automotive space, those are the groups that are quite interesting. You can also imagine a completely different group coming from left field that move into this. You can imagine a Google or an Apple producing a vehicle. They are, they are really, they have great design, and they make electronics, and they have the communication systems that are required of this new type of electronic vehicle. Perhaps they can also partner with others if they feel uncomfortable about getting into how automotive suspensions work and that sort of thing. So I can imagine those. I can also imagine a company like General Electric, which produces electric motors and many other components, not only for electric charging, but also for the vehicle itself moving to that space. So the amazing thing is that the electrification of transport has actually opened the possibility of non-traditional automotive makers to produce vehicles, because the vehicle now is much more simple to make. The advent of electric motors is actually, and the development of that technology is actually improving as we speak. And the improvement of battery energy storage technologies is also another key area. So that combination of those areas opens up the whole possibility of new manufacturers. At some point, perhaps, maybe 50 years from now or 20 years from now, there will be a convergence, of course, just like we've seen in gasoline power. But right now, we're really in a kind of opening where it's really becoming very divergent. There are other groups of companies that are also worth investigating. Of course, energy companies, especially those that make renewable power, renewable distributed power, wind power, solar power, or large utility companies as well. Unfortunately, some of these are state-owned and state-controlled, and they have certain restrictions that do not allow them to go into this space. But you can see there's a few examples of companies that have actually done that. For example, in Quebec, the hydroelectric company there has spun out a company that actually produces electric motors for vehicles because they have this surplus power and they're trying to figure out what to do with it, surplus funding as well, and they wanted to develop electric vehicles for Canada. So you can see that power companies in general, at least the ones that are smart about it, can begin to develop the technologies to make the beginnings of the smart grid, which is completely necessary for the full electrification of transport throughout the world. Our group has a collaboration with one of the Media Lab sponsors to develop our vehicle into the commercial version. The vehicle itself is called the Herico project, which is sponsored by Denoken, which is a Basque region government-funded incubator. And what they've done is established a new company to create this new platform. And this new company is basically a consortium of automotive suppliers. These suppliers are now actually co-manufacturers. What they do is they produce the key elements of the vehicle. One group will produce the robotic wheel, the electric in-wheel motor. Another group will provide the battery system, including cooling. Another group will provide the chassis. Another group will provide the glazing for the vehicle. Another group will provide the skeleton and so forth. And this will all be put together almost like a set of Legos. And that set of Legos will basically represent a kit of parts where the vehicle is can then be produced in a very lightweight fashion in a factory that can be distributed in different regions. That factory doesn't require a lot of infrastructure. And in fact, you can imagine placing that factory in different locations throughout Europe and perhaps in the US as well. That factory will not only produce the vehicles locally, but also service the vehicles locally as well. So there will be no centrally located manufacturing plant and then distribution. It will really be a distributed type of manufacturing. And so that's really the goal of this group, is to produce the vehicle. The second part of this group is to then deploy this vehicle in cities. In fact, they've negotiated some agreements with a number of cities in Europe and also in Asia for doing test pilot. Our research group is funded by them, and so they get access to the intellectual property of MIT. In exchange, they also fund us to work on this project as essentially research consultants on this project. So I've spent the last year and a half working directly with this group to manage the whole relationship, but also to guide the team, the MIT team, to provide the knowledge so that they can then commercialize this product and do the engineering, necessary vehicle engineering and pre-manufacture and then manufacture of the vehicle. And we expect that vehicle to be done very, very soon, by October of this year, 2011. There is no obstacle for other groups to collaborate with our group. There is no exclusivity in terms of the intellectual property. If there are groups that are interested, companies that are interested in the research, they can certainly join the Media Lab and fund special projects to work on this. The IP is, of course, licensed through MIT. The IP is owned by MIT. Of course, we work on creating it. And certainly we have no exclusivity. We can work with other groups. If other groups are interested in developing a specific vehicle for other applications or improving the design that we have, we certainly can work with them. We're very interested in pushing the edge of the technology. Our goal, of course, is always to push the edge of advanced research. And the best way we find to do this is to collaborate directly with industry, because they bring in expertise we don't have. We bring in some ideas, some radical innovations, demonstration of concepts. They really bring the expertise, not only the business side, but also the engineering side, so that we can then move from prototype to pre-production and then eventually production. That's really where the richness of the collaboration comes, is through those interactions.